if we feel unworthy, we're going to create an unworthy life. Money's going to be hard to come by, relationships are going to be lacking, everything's just going to feel difficult and strained, and we're going to want more, but it's always just going to be a little bit out of reach, and we won't know why. Because even if you learn techniques like meditation and visualization and other energetics, they're going to fall flat if underneath all of this you have this deeply held belief that you're not actually worthy of the things you're trying to manifest in life. So you can force things, you can force outcomes. It could be a case of, if you want to call in money, you see this with entrepreneurs a lot, they'll push, they'll hustle, they'll grind, they'll work insanely hard, and they'll ultimately burn themselves out to the ground in order to make that, because they believe that that's what it takes to create that energetic exchange with the money which they're trying to call in, because they have a low sense of value. So they need to put in all of this in order to get the thing they want. But it's incredibly imbalanced. And this is where really scarcity is just showing itself again. So really, scarcity is just based on the belief that we're innately not good enough and therefore not worthy of more. And these beliefs, we're conditioned with them at such a young age to begin with. And at some point in our lives, we start to develop this belief that we need to be something different, we need to do more, we need to be this, be that, in order to garner the love and the acceptance which we want so much. And as we get older, we start to develop these sub-personalities, like the perfectionist or the people pleaser or the critic, in order to try and become the version of ourselves we think we need to be in order to get that love and acceptance. But that is exhausting. And that's what leads to so much suffering, because people are just trying to be this thing they think they need to be all the time. That very action is the thing keeping them from themselves and what they're actually looking for. This is why people turn to drugs, alcohol, all of the other vices, because just to kind of dampen the feeling of suffering which they're going through all the time, disconnected from who they really are. Now, I remember this is something that I've dealt with a lot in my life. I don't know when it was, when I was young, that I started to, take on these feelings of unworthiness, low self-worth, that kind of thing. But there was a seed planted sometime when I was young, which basically developed as I got older. And I think this is what happens with people. It's reality will reflect back to you what you feel, so it compounds over time. As time goes on and you have more and more experiences which are reflecting back to you that idea that you're not worthy of things, you're not worthy of good experiences, as that goes over time, you've had more and more experiences reflecting that back to you. So the belief gets stronger and stronger, and it kind of grows out of control. And I remember it got this specific experience I had when I was stood once in a changing room in a clothes shop, and it was one of those changing rooms with 3 mirrors. So you see yourself from all different types of angles. And at this time, I'd really not been looking after myself well. I was feeling very negative. I was eating a lot of crap and a lot of junk food, and I just wasn't in a very good place. And I remember taking my top off and seeing myself in these 3 mirrors. Nothing was hidden. I felt like I was so on view to myself. And I just hated myself. I absolutely hated what I saw. Hated what I saw in the mirror. And the amount of cruel words that would come up in my head about myself. It's incredible just how cruel we can actually be to ourselves, how much we can amplify these negative beliefs we hold about ourselves. But But I remember that just because of just the sheer amount of self-hatred that I felt in that moment as I looked at myself in those 3 mirrors. Now, I'd come back to this experience several months later because I went through a really big shift, and I started to recognize how I didn't need to listen to these limiting thoughts that were going through my head. Like, I started to disidentify with them. And instead of listening to those, I started to consciously choose more compassion and more love for myself. And over time, that voice got quieter and quieter. That voice that was negative, that one which was so critical. Yeah, this is just what happens when we start to tap into who we really are underneath those layers. Because in truth, like, the game of life, it isn't about acquiring more, it isn't about achieving more things. It's about transcending our own sense of inadequacy with self-love. Even the parts of us that seek validation. This is how we transcend our conditioned self. And this is how we start to let go of these layers that are shrouding who we really are. Because it's by coming into contact with that essence of our true nature underneath that from that place, scarcity simply cannot exist. Because once we start to get to know who we really are, we're opening the doors to receive from the universe. And we're doing this because we're really starting to see our own innate greatness. And from that place, the universe can't help but respond to give us experiences which reflect that.